Welcome to our YouTube channel, where wisdom meets inspiration. In this channel, we share valuable insights to help you become the best version of yourself. Our content is designed to uplift your spirit and enrich your life. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay connected with this incredible journey. Click the subscribe button below.
We all know about the life of Buddha. We just heard something of his life, something of his teachings, so inspiring. Actually, he is the unfailing inspiration of spiritual life. Being born a prince and having gone through all these different phases of life, the kind of life he chose and the ideal he shows us, the realization, the inspiration, all this, it's really very heartwarming, heart-touching. And that is why we always look forward to Buddha Purnima, because it is a day which reminds us of the importance to go within. Just look at his image. It is such a huge inspiration. Indrawn gaze, face radiant with bliss, exuding peace. So this is the beauty of the Buddha state. Since we already discussed a bit of the life, I will just touch upon a few things which perhaps will be helpful to us, helpful to our spiritual life. And then we will move on to the teachings and, a question was put to me just before I came here as to the similarity and the differences between Vedanta and Buddhism. So maybe we can dwell a little more on that. That is something important for all of us to understand. There's a lot of similarity, there's also differences. So we can have a discussion on that. As regards the life of Buddha, he was born in Nepal, in Lumbini Gram, and he was, his father was a Shakya chief, a king, Shuddhodhan. And when the Buddha was born as Siddhartha, there was an astrological prediction made that this child would either be an emperor of emperors or he would be a mendicant and a world teacher. Now the father obviously wanted the child to be an emperor, and so he took all care to see that Siddhartha grew up that way. He was kept within the opulent palaces of Shuddhodhan and he lived a very lavish life. But even a palace becomes a prison if you are bound within it. So in the case of Siddhartha, the beauty of Siddhartha's mind is the sheer sensitivity of it, which you can see from that early age. In the early biographies of Siddhartha, Lord Buddha, you see this facet coming out very beautifully. Many times he was found sitting alone, all by himself, quiet, in a corner of the palace gardens, and to the great dismay of his father. And many times he was found completely removed from all the music and all the dances, all the what is going on, and absorbed within himself. And then there is that beautiful incident, you see, when his cousin shot down a bird, a swan which was flying. And then Siddhartha hastened to save the life of the swan. He removed the arrow, he nursed the bird back to health, and then when his cousin came and laid claim to the bird because he had shot it down, Siddhartha said, well, I think the giver of life is more important than the taker of life, so the bird belongs to me. So this beautiful, compassionate heart of Buddha, you can see it right from that age. He was a little boy at that time. This essential sensitivity is the most important thing in spiritual life. In the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, there is a beautiful example given by Vyas. Vyas was one of the major commentators on the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. He says at one place, the yogi's mind is supremely sensitive. It will immediately react to whatever comes in, and it is super sensitive to pain, to suffering. So sensitive, he gives the example of as sensitive as the human eyeball is to the incoming of an eyelash. If an eyelash by mistake gets into the eye, then the eye reacts so vigorously. You see, the eyeball, immediately there will be a flood of tears in order to remove the eyelash. So a yogi's mind is supposed to be like that. So sensitive, it reacts immediately to existential suffering, to existential problems. And the Buddha mind is like that. So you see, just one glimpse of a deceased person, an old person, a corpse, and a complete transformation. Because Jeta Thakur bolte hain, Bhije Deshlai or Shugno Deshlai. It was a dry matchstick, it immediately caught fire. This is the importance, this is the thing which we should catch for our spiritual life. Because unless the mind is maintained like that, it is not possible to come to spiritual experience, which is the heart of spiritual practice. The whole of spiritual life, spiritual striving is for spiritual experience, a breakthrough into the transcendent. So this can only be possible if the mind is maintained that way. So in the Buddha's life, there was this incident, you see, when he asked his father Shuddhodhan that he wanted to see around the city of Kapilavastu and not just stay in the palace. The king ordered that all the streets be cleaned and decorated and no ugly sight passed before Siddhartha's eye. He made sure that he did not see anything which could turn his mind within. He made sure that no suffering came before him. At least he tried to make sure of that, but it didn't work out. Because when he stepped out in his chariot, and there was a very wise charioteer with him, and as they proceeded through the streets, after some time, the Siddhartha actually encountered a man with disease. He was almost 29 years of age, Siddhartha, but he had not known disease. He had not seen old age and death. So he immediately asked, what has happened to this man? And the charioteer, he said, the body is a compound of the 5 elements, and these 5 elements deteriorate over time. So disease is a manifestation of that. And immediately it struck Siddhartha. So then he said, well, does everybody succumb to disease? And the charioteer said, yes. Will I also succumb? Yes, you will also succumb. That was it. And then after some time, he came across an old man tottering on his walking stick. And he said, what has happened to this man? And again the charioteer said, why, he's old. The human body gets old because it's after all the compound of the 5 elements. And then the would-be Buddha asked, will I also become old? And he said, yes. And another shock. And then he saw a corpse. And then he asked, well, what happened to him? And he said, life has left him. So then what is life about? What is all this about? So these existential questions, you see, they form the heart of, even if we don't subscribe to any religion or don't go into any belief system, if you just ask the fundamental questions about human existence, it will lead you inward. So this is what happened in Buddha's case. And then finally, yes, he saw an ascetic. And he asked, who was this man? And then the charioteer told him that this is a man who has renounced the world to find out the cause of suffering and to find peace within himself. And the radiant face of that monk, it made a great impact in Siddhartha's mind. He quickly returned home and he was a completely transformed person. And he made his decision that he would also like to lead the life of a monk and discover the deeper meaning of human life, the deeper dimensions of human experience. And thus he chose the path of an ascetic. And then we have his sadhana period. You see, he tried all types of methods. He first went into an ashram, he had his period of study. It didn't satisfy him. Just these logical structures, frameworks wouldn't satisfy him. He went into deep asceticism after some time. That also he found, that did not get him anywhere. That is why he discovered the Madhya Pantha, the actual middle path, avoiding the extremes and so bringing your life energies into fruition that they are able to reveal the higher consciousness, the higher levels of consciousness. This is there even in Bhagavad Gita, Yukta Ahara Viharasya, choosing the path, the middle path. So after this we come to his period of enlightenment. He resolved to sit in one place under the Bodhi tree actually, and not to get up from there until he had the complete knowledge. He got enlightenment there after a period of 49 days, they say, and he discovered the supreme light of knowledge. He understood that this was the deepest insight offered by the human mind. One had to transcend even the mind to enter into this state. He achieved the state of Buddhahood. And then it is said, legend says, that for about a period of 1 week, he was so immersed in the bliss of realization, he did not want to move from that place. He did not want to move. For about 3 weeks, he remained in the same place, and then it is said that the gods came to him and appealed to him that he should come out of this state and teach the world. Because you see, the power of realization is required before one can transmit this knowledge. It is not about teaching, it is about giving, it is about transmission. And the Buddha was born for that. So then started his Dharma Chakra Pravartan, that is, it started with his speech in Sarada Math. It was so powerful. Within a few days, he had more than 100 people following his path. And there were a number of arhants, that is, men of realization, because being close to the Buddha was itself a tremendous experience. You know how it is described? When Buddha would walk for about a radius of about 2 kilometers, people would know the Buddha was around because of the peace he exuded. The radiance of his personality was like that. In fact, it was his personality which brought about these tremendous transformations in India. Kings, emperors converted to Buddhism. Whole kingdoms converted to Buddhism. At one point of time, actually, half of India was Buddhistic. And over a period of a few centuries, almost half the world was thinking as the Buddha did. It's the power of realization. So, this was his magnificent personality. His teachings are very simple. He didn't go into deep-level metaphysics. He didn't talk much about that. He was silent to most matters concerning metaphysics and philosophy. In fact, when he was asked, is there an Atman? He was silent. And then the questioner said, so there's no Atman? And he was silent. So what will we make of it? And in addition to this, he was agnostic about religions. He was silent about metaphysics, but he was so compassionate and he radiated such a high level of spirituality that it was quite obvious that he knew the way. Regarding his teachings, he just asked us to look at life closely. You see, his 4 noble truths. The very first noble truth is the universality of suffering. We are so taught to evade suffering right from childhood. We never look at this important existential fact of life. But he asks us to look at it closely. The truth about suffering, and then the cause of suffering, that is the second noble truth. He identified it with desire, tanha. And he said that there is a way to overcome this, so that suffering does not enter our lives. That is the third noble truth. There is a way to overcome suffering. There is a way to overcome desire. The fourth is there is a path to do this. And he recommended that path to everyone. It was so appealing when it came out of the mouth of Buddha that, as I told you, the Buddhist Sangha grew like anything. And there were a number of realized souls in the Sangha in a very short time. He also recommended the eightfold path of discipline to all householders and monastics in order to arrive at this realization. It is very simple. You see, the steps he speaks of, they are very simple. Right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right contemplation, right effort, right livelihood, and right mindfulness. If all this is practiced, one naturally moves into the Buddha state. So you see, the teachings are very simple. He asks us to look within. He asks us to practice meditation. Because you see, higher consciousness unfolds only with meditation. And he asks us to adopt a lifestyle which is conducive to this. Now, coming to Vedanta and Buddhism, because this is the question that has been put to me. What are the similarities and what are the differences between these two great philosophies? There are a lot of similarities and there are differences also. As regards the similarities, you see the main similarities I will just mention to you, you can work upon it. First of all, this three-tier reality which Upanishads speak of, Vedanta speaks of, even Madhyamika Buddhism speaks of that. You know, from our standpoint, from our vantage point, how do we perceive reality? There is an absolute reality, the absolute reality of God or Brahman, and then there is this illusory reality, the Pratibhasika Satyam. Paramarthika Satyam, second step is Pratibhasika Satyam, the third is Vyavaharika Satyam, the reality of our everyday transactional world. So all these three together make up our understanding of reality. So this is there even in Buddhism. It is usually identified in two stages. There is the Paramarthika level and there is the Vyavaharika level. So this is one major similarity. The other one is, you see, what Vedanta actually speaks of, denying the independent existence of the world. It is not apart from our consciousness, a very moot point in our philosophy. It is something for us, all of us, to understand, because we must get the point of what is called intrinsic existence in order to understand this point. If something has to have a separate existence, it must be able to stay independent of everything else. This is the whole point. Now, when I perceive something, when I perceive this world, I always perceive it in my awareness. It is never apart from my awareness. Because it is not apart from my awareness, I cannot give it the status of independence. So everything has only dependent existence. Now this very important point, what will be the implication of this? Yes, the world will be then an appearance in my awareness. The world is not apart from my awareness. So this major moot point of Advaita Vedanta is also found in Vijnanavad. See, Buddhism has a number of schools, and the major schools are Vijnanavad and Shunyavad and Vijnanavad, part of Mahayana Buddhism. And in Vijnanavad, you will see pages upon pages of this discussion and this logic being applied. And they arrived at this, especially the philosophers of Vijnanavad, Asanga, and there's a whole group of them. They arrived at this truth, this very important logic to understand the nature of the objective universe. In our own way, we can understand it very simply because you see the samashti aspect, if you bring it down to the veshti, you understand it better. Is an object apart from me, or has it independence, has it an existence apart from me? How do I know it? How do I know the reality of this? I can only know it if it can exist independent of me. But look at this, in our own experience, nothing is independent of our awareness. In fact, I create a knowledge situation in which I experience anything. Just now I am experiencing, say, this podium. This is a podium in my awareness. In an ant's awareness, suppose an ant is moving here. This wouldn't be a podium. This is a mountain in an ant's awareness. And in a bird flying in the sky, if it could see this podium, it's a speck in his awareness. So, but it's a podium in my awareness. What does this mean? It is my inbuilt instrumentation that decides my perception, that decides what I see. So how can I give independent reality to objects? It's not that the object is there so I see it. It is because I am available with this instrumentation that I see the object as such. Now this is a very important point, common to both Advaita Vedanta and Vijnanavad, Buddhism. This is a major similarity. The third is the concept of Maya. We should call it a concept. You see, if what we discussed in the second point is true, then obviously the world is an appearance in Brahman, in the reality. And to explain this, how it appears as something different, Shankaracharya uses the word Maya. It is due to Maya that it appears as something separate from Brahman, and then you have that whole Adhyas Bhashya, there's a superimposition which has occurred on reality which makes the appearance appear so real. Now this concept of Maya also occurs in Buddhism. The word Maya is not used. The word energy is used. A kind of Shakti is responsible for the appearance of the world as something apart from consciousness. So you see, at several moot points of philosophy, there's a lot of similarity between Vedanta and Buddhism. The differences are also quite subtle and very interesting. One major difference is the concept of Atman, fundamental to Sanatana Dharma, is absent in Buddhism. The concept of self, the possibility of awareness being independent of mind function. This possibility is not negated there. Only Buddhism sees consciousness as discrete, discontinuous units. And we see awareness as the background reality behind all experience. Isn't it? That is what our Upanishads are constantly pointing out to us through all their logical framework. If you study Upanishads like Mandukya Upanishad, what are they trying to tell us? Behind all these variable states of waking, dream and deep sleep, there's an invariable running. Because you have been able to watch these states and study them objectively, which means there's an invariable running through them. So they are always trying to point out to the underlying substratum of all experience, which we call the Atman, pure existence, consciousness and bliss. This concept of the Atman is as a self, as a unit of pure awareness, as a background substratum is actually absent in Buddhism. They use the word anatta, in fact, the absence of a self. Consciousness is present, but an Atman, a self-entity made out of the consciousness, is absent in Buddhism. Also, our understanding of the ultimate reality, what we call Brahman, is a little different from the understanding of Buddhism, because in Vedanta, Brahman is considered Purna, isn't it? It is the absolute reality of pure consciousness, cosmic consciousness. In Buddhism, in both the schools, Divyanandaprana and Shunyavad, in Shunyavad, of course, the ultimate reality is Shunya, emptiness. Emptiness is the absolute reality, and in Divyanandaprana, it is actually called Alaya, which means that unit of consciousness which, together with mental formations, creates the reality of perception, creates the reality of objects of perception. So this is how they see ultimate reality. Now, from how do we understand all these contradictions? The thing is, I think there is a way of understanding it, although a traditional Buddhist would not give you this point. I would say the Purna and the Shunya, which they are talking about, are not two different things. If you actually empty your mind, there are times when all of us feel like emptying our minds, isn't it? The content of the mind is just too much for us to face. And we all ask for getting out of our stress, getting out of our little thought world. So when you try to empty your mind, awareness remains over, always. So you see, if you talk from the standpoint of awareness, reality is, obviously, it is Purna. Awareness fills the mind. But if you talk from the standpoint of perception and memory and thought, then it is Shunya. So I think Buddhism is taking the standpoint of Shunya, Sanatana Dharma takes the standpoint of Purna. The two are not two different concepts. The standpoint is different from where you are actually standing. Meditation alone can reveal actually what all this means, because how we look upon the mind in Hinduism is the mind is nothing but thoughts floating on awareness. Thoughts floating on awareness. So if you actually block out thought, awareness should dominate. Awareness should be the dominant mind function. This is what is called Purna. And if you indulge in the thought process only, then what is obviously going to happen? Thought is going to dominate over awareness. And so you need to empty thought in order to perceive reality. So this is Shunyavad. In our own way, we can try to understand these systems. But whatever it is, they are very particular about this. They will say reality is Shunya, and the Vedantists will say reality is Purna. But, Buddhism also says, although reality is void, there is the light in the void, which obviously should be the light of awareness. So like this, there are a number of differences and similarities. The third point of difference is the Vedanta takes up the analysis and discovery of joy, bliss. It's a recurrent theme in our Upanishads. And here is more an analysis of dukkha, existential sorrow, suffering. The fourth point of difference is how they deal with the ego. In the Vedanta, it will tell you, try to seek the source of the ego and it will take you to Brahman. It will take you to the reality of Brahman. Try to seek the source of the ego. So the ego is a pointer towards your real state, towards the truth, the real you, and you are Brahman. But Buddhism will tell you, well, the ego has to be dissolved and extinguished. Nirvana is to extinguish the mind, and that is the way to reach the state of the Absolute. So you see, there is some difference in the understanding of the ego. Then another difference is in the epistemology. In Vedanta, we use 6 pramans, 6 valid proofs of knowledge. You must be knowing it. We have pratyaksha, we have anuman, we have upaman, arthapatti, anupalabdhi, and shabda. These are the 6 pramans in Vedanta. Valid means of knowledge. In Buddhism, you have mainly only pratyaksha and anuman. The others are refuted. In fact, Shabda Praman is not accepted. They don't rely on the scriptures as such. They do rely on Apta Vakya, that is the experiences of men of realization. But these are the 2 main pramans used in Buddhism, so the epistemology also varies. These are the points where the 2 systems are different. In the sense, there are 2 paths, you can say, to the ultimate reality. Vivekananda was very enthusiastic about Buddha and Buddhism. He used to say, Buddha is my Ishta. He used to say, Buddhism is the fulfillment of Hinduism. Buddhism is the logical conclusion of Hinduism. And he used to say, although Buddhism arose as an offshoot of Hinduism, it created the logical superstructure, and which has also been borrowed by some acharyas of Vedanta, and that helped to re-establish the Sanatana Dharma. That is why you see the Buddha is considered as one of our avatars. He came to re-establish religion. And that is why Buddhism is so popular also, because it has a very strong logical format, a very universal way of understanding and looking closely at life without going too much into philosophy, looking closely at life, subscribing to yogic practices. You know, Yogachara, Vijnanavad, entirely depends upon yoga, meditative practices. It's not just about thinking and logic and understanding. The insight comes through meditation. So we have been able to draw a number of paths into these 2 mainstream religions. And the glory of Buddha's personality was a great appeal to Swamiji. And that is why Swamiji had the vision of Buddha when he was young, and he was always inspired by this great personality. In fact, he says at one place, Shakyamuni came not to destroy, but he was the logical conclusion, the logical development of the religion of the Hindus, and so a great blessing to Hinduism. Because you see, whenever the Buddha's personality was such, he was a man of realization. Whenever he was asked about himself, he would only say, you know, Buddhahood is a state. I, Gautama, have attained that state and you can attain it too. Follow the path and you will attain it. In fact, unless you attain it, what will you know about your religion? What will you know about these states? Religion is realization. So this is something which appealed very much to Swamiji. I think as a great world teacher, Buddha's life is an inspiration for all time. There are very many beautiful incidents in his life which show us some vital connections, the connection between life and consciousness, which is everybody's question. After a certain age, we all start asking these questions. How the mind reveals the higher states of consciousness. This is studied magnificently in in Buddhism, the different stages in which the mind can reveal the higher states of awareness. the deeper dimensions of the human mind and the evolution of the Buddha. You see, the human being can reach that state. A human being can become a Buddha. And what does being a Buddha mean? What are the characteristics of a Buddha? And what exactly realization means? All this is actually the treasure of every human being who's striving for a higher life. And all of this you will find in Buddhism. Thus, I would say that Buddha, his life, his teachings, his realization, his personality, and finally the movement which he ushered into this world has been one of the greatest blessings given by God to humankind. On this blessed day, when we have been given this opportunity to participate in this function and think about the Buddha's life, let us pray to him that something of his peace, his great heart, his understanding, his deep insights, something of this enter into our lives and make blessed our human experience on earth. Thank you very much.
Become Swami Vivekananda's messenger. Share the video with 3 of your friends.